Hey everyone, welcome back. This is Michelle Van Curve, known as Exceptional Shell, and also with my blog website, The World of Autism. I have a returning guest who we haven't seen in quite a while, and I'm glad that he came back on. His name is Stephen Cohen. Hey, Stephen.
For you.
Good. How are you?
Hey, good to be back.
Yeah, it's been quite a while. It's been quite a while. I know through our chats like on Facebook Messenger and stuff that like you've been doing a lot of work. So tell us all about that. What have you been up to since we've last had you on?
Sure. So, just finished up a 4-month legislative session. Um, Lots of late nights, sometimes as late as 11 o'clock. Uh, and some of our wins, the governor's signature window is still open, but some of our wins or proposed wins is a revision to the definition of intellectual and developmental disabilities, um, a parental caregiving. Uh, so essentially, parents would be able to stay home if that would work better for their family, um, to uh, care for their loved one, um, training for. Unfortunately, it's became optional at the end of the process. Excuse me, the process, but training for those for law enforcement relative to those on the spectrum. And I don't know if Florida has it or any other state. I do know that several reached out because I think we were the first in the country. But we expanded the day court, which is the detention alternatives for autistic youth court, to include more disability types, such as fetal alcohol syndrome disorder, things along those lines. I'm trying to think. Oh, we also, on the issue of FAS, we currently have a payer of last resort program called ATAP, or the Autism Treatment Assistance Program. So we continued a pilot program, um, FASD, that's going to be managed by ATAP. Um, and then those are some of the many. One last one now that I think about it. It's not in every state, uh, but we added uh, previous supportive decision making efforts to the guardianship law because not a lot of folks are familiar with it. Uh, and like I said, I don't know. There's a lot of stuff that's not in every state. Uh, so folks may have to dig around national resource centers, things along those lines. Uh, but yeah, those are just a brief summary of some of the many bills that we tracked, directly were involved in, etc. So that's really the big item that I've been up to that has significantly delayed my return.
Yeah, then honestly, and those are really important too, especially like with as individuals like with autism and other people with that are neurodivergent, like once you're diagnosed, it's lifelong, right? So people have to understand that there are resources like this out there, and the fact that there's a lot of work being in the making and stuff is huge, especially like with guardianship. That's a definitely a really big one because like I even know people like I've been like parts of like other boards I'm part of, like and other like autism groups I've been part of that like I have one that I'm still part of with New Jersey called the New Jersey Autism Think Tank. And with them, like one of the members, they're still going through the guardianship process. Like they're fighting it so much because of their kid that just turned 18. So things like that, trying to make things easier for families and stuff because, we're only getting older.
exactly. Uh, and and then also there's always particularly with what's happening in Washington from a neutral perspective, uh, Medicaid. I forget the figures, but there were significant funding cuts to Medicaid, and then also the uh, regional centers. I don't know what New Jersey and Florida call those, but there were significant um, cuts to those, and then also early intervention as well. So it was not a great fiscal session. A lot of bills with money attached to them did end up dying. Uh, and one that comes to mind is we sought to, and it's particularly the Vegas catchment area school district does not permit uh, RBTs in schools, planning privacy, among other lovely uh, defenses that they come up with out of thin air. Uh, but we sought to reverse that, unfortunately, because of the fiscal, primarily from the school district. That one did die. It was really unfortunate because a lot of families are kind of faced with the choice of public school, charter school, homeschool, or full-time therapy. And it's like I said, it's really unfortunate. No family should be put in that situation, but that's with Nevada's landscape siloed as it is in a lot of ways. That's kind of the choice that a lot of families end up in.
Yeah, for sure. I know, through my perspectives being in working in the school district that in Florida, I know at the time like this was like within the past year or two that the governor actually was in favor of having that outside provider service in the schools. So like last school year, in the district that I work, the public school district that I work with, that there was a partnership with an ABA therapy company. And so from there, we actually did have a lot of where there were RBTs that are actually helping with students in the schools uh and even from other companies too, like and it's uh like thank goodness about this, but there it's still continuing into this next coming school year. So every state of how they're handling the money is one thing for sure, but definitely Medicaid is definitely has been impacting a lot with the outside services. Like if there are a lot of families that are trying to get services and stuff that unfortunately there's been a lot of funding cuts and stuff. So it's like but at the same time, there's actually been a lot more research in the ABA field itself now. I don't know if last time we've chatted, but the previous last year, I passed my exam and became a BC ABA. So I'm no longer an RBT. So, so from my experiences and everything, there's been a lot that's been happening from like the outside perspective, like the private practice versus in school districts. And like when it comes to with the private practice, they're getting impacted the most, just as much as with schools, like school districts. So there's been a lot of research now actually that so how early or like early intervention is important, but also the fact that like there's been more research that too many hours of services, like it's important to have a mix of quality of life in regards to like where parents have to apply what's been practiced in sessions. So that way we're not always going to be there for the client. Like we have to learn to figure it ourselves out because that's part of our job. So but yeah, in regards to with the funding and stuff, again, going circling back to that, it is unfortunate though, because it's definitely cutting a lot of like for families that do need more of the service in the beginning. Yes, it's crazy.
Indeed. there was a wait list to begin with, and it's only gonna grow um, as the funding um, was flatlined from poor poor budget projections from 2 years ago. Because Nevada is one of those lovely states whose legislature only meets every other year, so you have to think about uh, 2 years worth of caseloads, etc. And it's really projections, and you kind of don't know as the program um, kind of you kind of have you might get more applications in the summer when school's out, things along those lines, uh, or less. Folks may travel, things along those lines as well. Uh, but it's really hard to predict for 2 years what your caseload may look like. So that's that's an interesting thing, and like I said, Nevada is one of the few states that has that uh, need. I think Texas is one of the other ones, uh, but yeah, it's just interesting to be on the front lines 95% of the time from Las Vegas because our capital is in northern Nevada, Carson City. Uh,
Mhm.
but just to see, even from home and listening to these sometimes 11-hour hearings, with breaks of just some of the things that they deem more important than disability services. It's just sad. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where Nevada is at.
Hmm. And is there anything new that you're working on now, like with legislative, that's gonna help support more with the families?
So the interim, our legislature just adjourned last Monday. So as we always say, the next session begins the day after, so last Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and one of the things I was thinking about is as we have a meeting with a well-known provider tomorrow is potentially codifying um, long-term planning in state statute. So estates, wills, things along those lines, and special needs trusts, able accounts, all those sorts of things.
Hmm.
Uh, because it's an uncomfortable conversation to begin with, um, but then to throw a child with a disability or a young adult with a disability into the mix as well makes it even more challenging and uncomfortable finding an appropriate trustee, guardian, etc. So that'll be one of the things that I'll be considering for next session. And And then our DD Council, Governance Council on Developmental Disabilities, 5-year state plan public comment period just opened yesterday. Uh, so that was my transitional project. So I'm kind of, for the next about week or so, working both as the governor has the opportunity to not sign or veto any of the bills that we were tracking, voluminous in nature, uh, and kind of were holding listening sessions to complement our many hours of town halls and kind of how we've put that into a draft that will cover October 1st of 26 through September 30th of 31. So it kind of guides once we have all the feedback put together in a nice bow. Uh, we kind of guide our objectives and our activities to try to meet those objectives. And a lot of them do have an educational component relative to policymakers because not every, you know, in a part-time citizen legislature, the legislators have full-time jobs that they take leave from uh, during the sessions. There's some lawyers, there's some teachers, those sorts of things. So they do come with some sort of background that either they can look at something or they live it to an extent. Uh, but yeah, you kind of have to see, um, just being able to educate folks of, you know, you don't know what you don't know kind of thing, and kind of starting from scratch and putting it in the easiest language for them to understand it as
Right.
legislators.
Yeah, I know, like, when it comes to, like, we have to be careful, like, with technical terms that we're using, because, like, especially with families, like, how much knowledge they have about what something. Like, I know in my field, I have to be careful not to use too much jargon, especially with parents, because it's like, how much do they really know about with this information and vice versa. So I get you're dealing with that too, like how much with families, how much knowledge they know. So you have to be careful as well, like with the jargon that you're using from the legislative perspective.
Absolutely. So,
Yeah, for sure. And also about with not and I actually even have friends of mine who are autistic and neurodivergent, and there's many of them that actually still don't really know about with able, which is shocking because I'm like, when able could be, just from my personal experiences, able could actually be a really good thing. And it just for people gotta be careful with with having with like the SSI benefits and stuff, but just, that's from my take on that. But yeah, of course, like having all different options is really important for families. And I think including about with all these options could give a lot of families guidance to what they really need that's best for their child, you know?
and I just learned, and it's also a concept with SSI as well. Uh, but I learned something new yesterday and I have to further research it. But apparently, uh, which ultimately becomes relevant at some point, natural cycle of life uh, for children and young adults whose parents and or themselves are collecting either SSI or SSDI. Once you switch over to survivor benefits, there's earnings limits. So if for 2025, if you earn more than $1,950 a month between your benefit amount and working, for every $2 over $1,950 you earn, your benefit amount is going to be reduced by $1. So it's kind of disincentivizes working, and it's unfortunate because, you know, state minimum wage laws, on one hand, a lot of people with disabilities, you know, want to work just to get themselves out of the house, keep their minds sharp.
Mhm.
But then, they have to either find an employer that already has a model of part time or request an accommodation thereof, uh, because otherwise they're going to go over those thresholds pretty quickly, depending on how much their hourly is.
Yeah, basically, like I've learned that even from my own parents because of their background with that. But yeah, it's crazy to me about that because it's like either, like you were saying, it's either you basically can't really work that much, like you're basically are holding on to where you have the benefits from SSI, which can be good depending on individual cases, and then you have where, like you were saying, there are people that really want to work, they want to get out of the house, they want to learn new stuff, right? Get the skills and stuff to be able to go through with life because there's so much in the world and stuff that we have to learn how to navigate just like with everybody else. Of course that, you know, everybody's going to learn stuff in their own way, obviously, because we all process things differently. But the fact that, yeah, a lot of times it's got its pros and cons, basically, where the benefits can be helpful, like especially for those who need a lot of the medical coverage. That's a great thing. But otherwise, if you're not the type of person that needs it as much for medical coverage, then it's like kind of a give and take, you know?
Just navigating all these governmental systems and entities. It could be a full-time job by itself.
Honestly, honestly, that's why, like, for me, I just want to encourage a lot of families that you guys listen to this, that please do your research, like keep reading on stuff, like find all the information that you can get. There's a lot of resources online and stuff to learn more. A lot of different podcasts like this one, other podcasts that's online out there that do these kind of works. Also, for people, there's in every state there is, I've noticed, I know in Florida they have a whole self-advocacy page online for all the self-advocates throughout Florida. And so there's a lot of published articles that are out there about with like from the legislative level. I don't know by you, Stephen, if there's something like that, but I know in Florida they have that.
Our DD Council has a whole course, and I don't know if Florida has it as well. Partners in policy making.
Yes.
So we do we kind of do in a lot of ways try to train family members and advocates themselves. This is what's happening. This is what you can do to change the world. And the other thing, and I'm presuming that Florida has it as well, but I don't know where it structurally lives there. But uh, you said, as you probably have heard, University Centers for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities are considered
Yeah.
for elimination currently, but the LEN program, uh, leadership, e- leadership, I think it's education for neurodevelopmental disabilities. It could be excellence, but don't quote me. Uh, but I was ambitious enough to do both in the same year. But it really gives you, like I said, it gives you the curricula to kind of uh, enhance your skills to change the world, especially here in Nevada.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I do want to wrap this up because I'm seeing with the time and stuff. Is there a important message that you want to leave for the community for this episode?
So, as I said a couple of times, um, just find your allies, and you know, just don't be afraid to stand beside them, and together as a community, we can all change the world.
Awesome. That's great. It's really like, like just having those allies, like doing stuff like this, like where everybody's coming together because we all want to make a difference for each other and for the community. And as more people, like the prevalence rates of even just for autism alone are going up. So more allies and support are needed to make a difference.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Steven, I want to thank you so much for coming back on and everything. It's been so great getting to chat with you today through this and stuff, so I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Maybe we can
And
do a third episode. We'll see what happens.
yeah, we'll see. I will definitely keep in touch with you about that. And also for everybody, just so you know, you can follow me at Exceptional Shell at Self Advocate MV. You can also follow Steven online on his social media platforms too. I know you're on Facebook. I don't know about Instagram.
Facebook primarily, yeah.
Facebook, okay. So yeah, for people that want to learn more about what Steven, just Steven chat, follow him on Facebook. And for me, like again, as I said, you can follow my professional brand page, Exceptional Shell at Self Advocate MV. And don't forget to follow and subscribe to my blog website, The World of Autism.